Something was watching us. The story of what happened began in 2009, a year my family would never forget. Back then, we were a large family. My grandmother, with her 7 children, had built a rapidly growing dynasty. Each of her children had at least 2 kids, except for my aunt, who never had children, and my mother, who only had me. In total, we were 11 grandchildren. Every year, during the holidays, it was our tradition to gather and travel as a family, but the year 2009 would be different. My uncle Alejandro, a man with an adventurous spirit, had bought a farm in a rural area with a warm and temperate climate. The farm seemed like something out of a dream, a white house on top of a small hill, with 2 floors and balconies in every room, from which you could see the entire valley. At the bottom of the hill there was a large parking area, and a little further away, a big, lonely 1-story house hidden among trees. The landscape was so beautiful that sometimes we felt as if we were in another world, one where time stood still. But what impressed me the most were the sounds, the whisper of the wind through the trees, the singing of geese and ducks in the small lake, the distant neighing of the horses. It was a place that, although seemingly perfect, had something in its stillness that I couldn't quite understand, something I couldn't name, just like when a child feels fear but can't explain why. It's just instinct. My uncle Alejandro invited us to spend a few days at the farm. We were all excited. My cousins and I played and laughed non-stop. We swam in the pool, explored every corner of the property, and the fresh morning air was the perfect refuge for our endless games. Everything seemed idyllic, almost unreal. But after those days of fun, we had to return to the city. The children had to go back to school and the adults to their jobs. My uncle, due to his commitments, couldn't be there all the time, so he decided to hire someone to take care of the farm and the animals in his absence. Mr. Ramón, a sturdy man with a deep voice, arrived with his wife, a woman with an expressionless face, and their 2 children, Esteban and Sara. Esteban, a boy of about 9 or 10 years old, had a sad look in his eyes, as if childhood laughter had slipped away from him too quickly. Sara, his sister, was a mystery. Though she was about our age, her behavior was more like that of someone much older, quiet, distant, lost in thoughts we couldn't understand. Mr. Ramon's family stayed at the farm whenever my uncle wasn't there. Was that what it needed to be? But when we or other guests arrived, they moved to a set of rooms my uncle had built especially for them, a place separate from the main house. Even so, we shared the kitchen and the rest of the farm, and although it was sometimes difficult to ignore the fleeting glances or the awkward silence of Mr. Ramon's wife, the adults acted kindly, as if everything was fine. For us children, it seemed like the perfect situation. So much freedom, so much space to play and explore. During that year's holiday season, when the whole family gathered at the farm again, we ran excitedly toward the pool, laughing and chatting. What unsettled me the most was the relationship between Sara and her mother. The woman was always cold and distant with us children. Never a smile, never an invitation to play. Her attitude was entirely different when she interacted with the adults. Then she became a charming, warm woman who made everyone laugh. But in the presence of children, her face would turn blank, as if she didn't know how to interact with us. It wasn't just my imagination. My mother and my aunts noticed it too, though they never spoke about it openly. Night came quickly, as it often does in remote places where the sun sets without a trace. We were exhausted, gathering in our rooms to sleep, while the adults stayed outside on the terrace, surrounded by the murmurs of the night. They laughed, shared cold beers and snacks, but something in the air, something in the stillness of the farm, made me uneasy. I, gripped by an inexplicable curiosity, got out of bed without knowing exactly why. I just felt an urgent need to get closer, to hear more. Maybe I wanted to ask my mother for something, but as I approached the balcony, something in the air made me stop. Instead of stepping forward, I stayed hidden in the shadows, unnoticed. That was when I heard the conversation. Mr. Ramón, with his deep voice, was talking to my uncle Alejandro and the other adults. Something in his words made my skin crawl. Apparently, before our arrival, the farm had been rented out to a parish or a center that organized spiritual retreats. During one of these retreats, a group of nuns and young novices, women preparing to enter the convent, had arrived, hoping to find peace and tranquility in that remote setting. But things hadn't gone as expected. Mr. Ramón recounted that the nuns hadn't even spent a single night at the farm. Just hours after arriving, They began packing their belongings in a hurry, their desperation palpable. They rushed to the entrance and, between nervous whispers and hurried prayers, demanded to leave immediately. Mr. Ramón, surprised, tried to stop them. He explained that the road to town was long and that he couldn't drive them, as his truck wasn't available at the time. But the women, visibly terrified, refused to stay another minute in that place. They called someone, though Mr. Ramón never knew who. The only thing he remembered was that, after hours of waiting, a young man arrived in a truck, the kind used to transport crops or livestock.